Now, if we look at a Solomonic grimoire, the magical arts are attributed to Solomon even from before the time of Jesus, and he's the great because of his wisdom, although Solomon probably had nothing to do with anything like this. Jewish exorcists exorcised and had power over demons by using Kabbalistic intonation of scripture, which they would choose certain passages of, and they would intone the passages, and they would get rid of the demons. And there's some wonderful descriptions in the early literature of Jewish exorcists being summoned by Roman emperors and Roman governors to exorcise someone, and they will cause the spirit to come out and trouble some water and go off another different direction and all those sort of things. Very interesting to study these examples of exorcism, but it's all done with this tradition of Solomonic magic. The most famous thing in Solomonic magic comes from Ezekiel 14:19-21. There are 3 verses of 72 letters, and they yielded 72 angelic names. These are the angels that supposedly Solomon imprisoned in the brass vessel. It's also the sum of the numerical value of the letters of the Tetragrammaton, the letters of God, YH, VH, in a Pythagorean tetractys. What is that? Well, this is a Pythagorean tetractys. This is Yahweh, YHVH, etc. So if you put them in the Pythagorean tetractys and you sum them up, you'll get 10 plus 15 plus 21 plus 26 equals 72. This is the influence that the Pythagoreans had on the early Jewish Kabbalists and mystics. This is known as the Shem HaMephorash, the 72 names. And these are the 72 angels that represent different degrees of the zodiac all the way around that can be controlled by the archangels, but these 72 individual angels are angels that then control lower hierarchies, and then by this control system, the archangels, then the Shem HaMephorash angels have control over the fallen angels and the demonic angels. So each of the 72 divine names is generated from Yahweh, YHVH. They rule 5 degrees of the zodiac in Yetzirah, and they command all the hosts of the lower angels in Asiya. We've already studied Kabbalah, so you probably know, I'm not sure you all know what I'm talking about the Kabbalistic worlds. The 36 of them are in each quadrant for the 4 directions, and that's commanded by one of the 4 archangels, Michael, Raphael, and so on, from even higher world, Berea. And so all the angelic functions, including the fallen angels, can be commanded with the cooperation of the archangels.
Would it be 18 if it's in each quadrant?
I'm sorry, that should be 18. That's correct. It should not be 36. I'll change it on the thing. I'll change the number. That's right. So there are 18 of them in each quadrant for the 4 directions. So if we would take a quadrant like this, we'd have 18 of them. Now we're going to have another little thing, Pope Runyon and his Temple of Astarte, a little video about the technique of Solomonic angel magic.
You must first master the art of angelic invocation.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look for a minute at some geometry and numerology. The tetractys, the Pythagorean tetractys, was applied to Hebrew numerology. And Plato, I said, was a Pythagorean initiate. And there was a doctrine of how space was generated that the Pythagoreans came up with. It got applied to Kabbalah, so that the way that the universe was generated was understood in the same way. You know, there are Platonic solids. There's just so many solid figures that can exist with so many sides in 3-dimensional space. Well, Kabbalistic magic used these concepts to define the generation of space. Ein, which means not. Nothing, nothing at all, non-existence. There was nothing at the beginning. You have to understand, in Kabbalah, God doesn't exist. God is non-existent, because the word exist means to stand out or be evident or be manifest. God is totally not nothing is what God is. And in the first manifestation of God, God becomes Ein Sof, or Ein Suf, which means not limited, or infinite space. And there is a limitless space. So the first manifestation of deity is limitlessness, infiniteness. Not light, not anything else. Not direction, just infinity. And then finally, the Or, the light, is generated. Ein Sof Or. There's limitless light. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And this in Latin, as fiat lux, you find it written on the gates to the great temple on the hill here called the University of California, Santa Cruz. So Solomonic magician creates divine space just as God does in the magic circle. This is an imitation of the above in the below. This is like the Hermetic emerald tablet, like the models in Plato's cave. We'll talk about the emerald tablet and that kind of stuff later. By using true correspondences, a magician becomes a divine creator for a particular work. So angelic hierarchy is named as an hypostasis of God, or as extensions of God. Archangels are, as we said before, ending in EL. The 72 zodiacal angels are extensions of God's name, different ways you can put God's name together. And the lower angels and fallen angels and demons have individual names under the control of specific hypostases of Yahweh, but they're not made of God's name. Why? Because they're made from Babylonian names of Babylonian deities, in fact. So by knowing the secret names of God, the adept is able to get divine attention and cooperation to rule over the powers and principalities of the lower worlds, etc., just as you had in the Egyptian books of the dead. And the magic circle then kind of embodies both the astrological macrocosm and the microcosm. So the magic circle is a very, very important thing to understand. It's an act of creation.
It represents the perfect circle of the vast universe and the unbroken.
So the purpose of theurgy was not just to summon angels, lower angels and elemental spirits to do your bidding and all this sort of thing, but it was also to make communion with the archangels themselves and the archangelic forces. So you have to have made an alliance with the archangels, and Runyon, as you heard, requires that his people do 4 rituals, one with each of the 4 major archangels before they go any farther with this thing. The girdle of Moses, which is used in the higher levels of Martinism, the Elu rituals, requires 7 rituals for all 7 of the Kabbalistic archangels. And as a matter of fact, if I ever take anybody through that, they have to do those on a separate day, and each one has to be done in a certain kind of way for people that go this route. So each invokes all the major angels of that day, as well as the archangel that presides over that day. So if you take the Martinist path and want to continue to the advanced Elu, then you will have to make this kind of communion with the archangels that he's talking about. These are rituals that are used for the apprentice degree of the Elu. This is the advanced Martinist stuff that most people don't get into.
Remember, you're invoking these angels, not evoking them. Evocation means bringing something out of yourself. Invocation's like praying. You're calling them down from above. You're inviting them to visit you. You're asking them for their help. Raphael, Raphael, Raphael. As the soft chanting continues, each person around the circle will invoke in his or her turn until the altar top is haloed with an electric blue aura of astral energy, shot through with golden rays of light. Then you know you are on holy ground. Until you have made such a connection and established such a bond with all four of the archangels, you must not venture further into the darker realms of Solomon's magic. The four great archangels of the quadrants firmly on our side, we're ready to open Solomon's brass vessel and call forth the genie to appear in the dark mirror on the triangle of art. As an example, we're going to summon the spirit Astaroth, who is described in the Goetia as a great and powerful duke, whose lamen is to be made out of copper. Copper is the metal attributed to the planet Venus. This is appropriate because the spirit Astaroth is actually the ancient Canaanite goddess Astarte. Therefore, we will operate as if we are evoking her in the seventh Kabbalistic sphere of Netzach, with the understanding that all operations of the Goetia take place in the lunar sphere of Yesod, through which all the multicolored lights of the higher spheres are reflected. And keeping this in mind, we should always perform our evocations when the moon is waxing. We're going to call forth the spirit Astaroth, who is actually Astarte, the queen of heaven and the patron goddess of our temple.
Like from the 50s, a pinup.
Well, actually, this guy's kind of a motorcycle dude, I think. Anyway, now to
Were
evoke
there some leathers that they were showing?
to evoke the microcosm, which is within yourself. Now you're evoking. You use what are called the lesser pentagram or lesser hexagram rituals. If you're standing within the circle, which is the macrocosm, all the things in the circle are inscribed with the right stuff and the right correspondences, and the archangelic beings have all been invoked. And then you've established communion with them in earlier rituals. Now you must evoke them within your microcosmic soul, as well as all the lower ranks of hierarchy, because that's where they live. They live in you. This is a process of soul remembrance, or anamnesis. And what's used for this is a lesser ritual of the pentagram. It represents you. You're the pentagram. And the ritual begins in a certain place, and how you do it and how you use it to start this part of the invocation or the evocation. This is one description. Take a steel dagger in the right hand, face east, touch the forehead, and say Ata, Malkuth, Vegabura, Vegadula, Leolam. This is basically how it's done. I'll show you what it looks like. And then you go to each of the four directions, and you pierce the center of the pentagram, and you vibrate the deity name of each of these places. Yod He Vav He Adonai Ie He Agla, and so on. And then you stand with your arms outstretched and intone. Before me, Raphael. So what direction would you be facing for Raphael? Okay. Behind me, Gabriel. At my right hand, Michael, etc. And then you make what's called the Kabbalistic cross, which is basically what we do here. So let's take a look at what this would be like. The ritual of the heptagram, which is the evocation of 7 planets, will happen, and I think he shows a little of this as well. This represents the planetary rulers.
Ata, Malkuth, Vegabura, Vegaduda, Neolam, Om. Amasha'o. Adonai. Ahea. Ata, Gibor, Leolam, Adonai. Before me, Raphael. Behind me, Gabriel. At my right hand, Michael. At my left hand, Oriel. Around us flame the pentagrams. Above us shines the six-rayed star. Ata, Malkut, Vegabura, Vegadula, Leolam, Om.
The operator should perform a planetary septagram ritual, internalizing and then externalizing the Kabbalistic lunar sphere of Yesod, within which all goetic operations are encompassed. Ararita Shaddai El-Kai. Ararita Shaddai El-Kai.
So from within the microcosm, you're evoking that which is within you of the angelic kingdom, so to speak. Ancient Egyptian Sumerian prayers and the books of the dead and all the ancient magic we have understands this as invocation, as bringing down things that are above you and up there. But in Hermetic magic in the medieval period, it was started to be understood as internalized. And in the 20th century, this fellow here, Pope Runyon, is a Jungian. He understands everything he does that way. So there are many techniques for doing this evocation. You have to wear certain kinds of rings and assume what's called a magical personality. Shamans like to put on masks and dress up like the gods and do things, and so do these people. Now here we're going to operate through Mendiel, which is the 36th angel of the Shem HaMephorash. It's shortened as Shem HaMephorash, a lot of people say. We're going to take the proper sigil and place it on the altar. The name is Mendiel. Sign is Capricorn. Planet is the sun. The degrees between the 25th and the 30th. The meaning is the honor of God, and the psalm is Yod He Vav He, I have loved thy habitation, and of thy house and thy place and the abiding of thine honor.
So the sigils start at Cancer, the 36th would be...
No, this is the one he's choosing for this particular operation.
No, but the fact that it's Capricorn, but it's the 36th, oh, that would put it...
Yeah, that's how it is set up in the...
72.
Right. Okay.
Form us to love one another and to hate one another. I invoke thee, the terrible and invisible God who dwelleth in the void place of the Spirit. I am he, the bornless Spirit. I am he, the truth. I am he who hates that evil should be wrought in the world. I am he that brings the lightning and the thunder. I am he who showereth life upon the earth. I am he, the grace of the world. The heart girt with the serpent is my name. Come thou forth and follow me, and make all spirits subject unto me, so that every spirit of the firmament and of the aether, upon the earth and under the earth, on dry land or in the water, of whirling air or of rushing fire, and every spell and scourge of God may be obedient unto me.
Domini dedixi decorum Dominus Tue, et lucum habitationis gloria Tue, mendiel. Conjure thee, Spirit Astaroth, I supplicate thee, Goddess Astarte, I conjure thee in the northern quadrant, under the power of the Archangel Uriel, through the angel Mendiel, in the realm of the king Zemanar, common thee by Barlamensis, Baliciensis, Aumantia, Apollodosades, and the mighty princes Geneo and Leocade, ministers of the seat of Tartarus, and chief princes of the throne of Apologia in the 9th region. Come.
Yes, she is here.
We welcome you, Goddess Astarte. We apologize for summoning you with such strong incantations, but we hasten to declare that we command only that portion of you that dwells within us. Your higher presence we hold in true reverence and serve in all humility. Goddess, do you have an oracle for us?
I have an oracle for all those who would seek me. Each priestess must call me forth through her own image and in her own time. It is enough that you have opened the gates. Now, each one must make her own sacred journey.
Great Goddess Astarte, we thank thee for having attended our rites and granting our wishes. And as we release your special presence to return to your lovely realm, we ask that your essence remain stronger within us. And we ask that you return to us when called by the rites of holy magic. Hail and farewell. If you demand the presence of a spirit who is actually an ancient god or a goddess, then you should apologize to them when they appear. Now the reason is this. Our ancestors transformed these ancient deities into demons and imprisoned them down in the brass vessel of the collective unconscious. Now, you can treat them like medieval demons. You can conjure them with powerful incantations. You can use the curse of chains, or you can torment them into coming by burning their sigils, but then how do you think they're going to treat you? Remember, they are part of you, just as you are a part of the universal mind which we all share. They appear from the collective unconscious through your reflection when you evoke them. And they return to the universal mind through your image when they depart. For this reason, you should treat even the lowest of their number with respect, and the gods and goddesses among them with veneration. And for this reason, you should never, under any circumstances, attempt to use this system of evocation to bring harm to any other person.
Well, we've seen a lot of things now about the Goetia and how it developed in the Western mystery tradition and what it became as it became synthesized with the Hermetic tradition and became part of the Hermetic tradition. We've seen it come from ancient shamanic howling and naming of ancestors and then of divine beings and finding communication with them through magical traditions that involved sending out curses to people, changing physical circumstances, causing people to fall in love with other people, and all kinds of different things that it was used for, to developing into a very high art of communication with the higher worlds. Now, there have been two main uses of the Goetic sciences in the Western mystery tradition. The one we're mainly concerned with is the use that we call divination. It's to procure an oracle, to procure guidance. It was known later, and you'll find it in the Golden Dawn and other things, as having a conversation with the guardian angel. There was, in the angelology, was a concept of an angel assigned to each person. It goes all the way back to sayings of Jesus from the New Testament, speaking about the angel of each person. And in theosophical tradition, it's associated with what is called the solar angel, who is in charge of the soul until a person becomes mature enough, and then his own higher nature is in charge of himself. But this is what the work of the later high-tech spiritual groups like the Elokoan, which I've mentioned before, was focused upon. Now, this has been called white magic in Alice Bailey traditions and other things, and this is the so-called white magical use, but this is also used for negative purposes, because there were communication with lower angels and lower beings and demonic beings for infernal purposes as well. The Temple of Astarte, which we watched and saw an actual operation they went through using a certain angel, Mendiel, and so on, to procure an oracle from Astarte, who's been demonized as Astaroth in the Western angelological, demonological tradition, but represents a Babylonian deity. We saw the long preparations that one goes through in order to make that kind of a contact. And this material was made available by Poke Runyon because, as he tells us, a lot of people had stolen his material and were using it wrongly or misrepresenting how to do these things. You see, he had come up with an understanding of these things. There's no lineage of people that teach you how to do this sort of thing. He had to learn it by understanding and reading the relics of the ancient masters of these things, and much of it is coded, and a lot of it is filled with blinds that lead you off in the wrong direction, and only people with a very high spiritual development can read these old materials and understand how to use them. That's the way the Western mystery tradition progresses. as opposed to direct lineage like you have in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, for 800 years. In the West, people revive and pick up and breathe new life into things that existed once and were no longer existing as a lineage. For example, Rosicrucianism and all the different Rosicrucian groups, Templarism, and so on. And it's true in many ways. In American Indian tradition, among the Ogallala Sioux, the tradition was kept and it was lost, and it was picked up again. And in the modern era, among the Navajos, Hosteen Claw, who was a young man who was born at the end of the last century, and he found in a cave the shamaning tools of old shamans, and nothing had been transmitted because things had been broken by wars and things like that. And by communing with them, he was able to revive all this and bring it back. And Hosteen Claw is a very famous Navajo, not just weaver, but a Navajo shaman who was very powerful. You should read about him sometime if you have a chance, or go to the museum to him that exists down in New Mexico. But that's the way that the thing progresses, and Poke Runyon has picked up some pieces here and put them together in a way that people hadn't before. He took the clavicle of Solomon, and he took the almadal of Solomon, and was able to understand how the two could be used together in order to reconstruct this kind of an operation. So that's what you saw, and it's probably the best work that anybody's done in the modern period, in my opinion. It's much better than what the Golden Dawn people and other people have done. And traditionally, for receiving an oracle, one would use an innocent child or a young virgin woman as a vessel for the oracle to speak through. If you took my, which you should have had before this, but hope that you will, the Western mystery tradition in its ancient form, which is really the way to study this whole tradition, to start with my seminar on initiatic mysteries of classical antiquity, which used to be the first part of my seminar on the Western mystery tradition, which I call the Western mystery tradition ancient. And in the initiatic mysteries module on oracles, the oracle at Delphi and the Trophonian oracle and so on, you probably heard me tell the story of the Roman general who is trying to chase the army of another Roman general in order to catch them and have a battle. And he's not sure quite where to go, so he comes upon an innocent young shepherd girl, probably 14 or 13 years old, and has his men grab her and take her down into a cave. Now, going down into the subterranean parts of the earth was the most terrifying experience for ancient Greeks that there was. That's why they were used as places to reach the divine underworld. It's a kind of a, today we would see it as kind of an allegory of going deep within yourself into your own underworld. But to them it was a terrifying and supernatural place. So, and it was a place where one could be overcome by the spirit of Apollo, who would speak through them. And this is, of course, the theory of the oracle at Delphi, etc., that was advanced at the time. And so they took her down deep into this cave and left her, and so that she would be overcome. The priestly people among them asked the gods for an oracle through her, and she pretended to give an oracle, but they knew she was faking it because her hair was not standing on end. Because when someone was possessed by the spirit, where they were in the same condition physiologically as being scared to death, and their hair would stand on end. And so they took her down farther into the cave, and finally her hair stood on end, and she delivered an oracle, and then they left her panting. Maybe she would die of a heart attack or not, we don't know. Mediums generally don't live very long. And we'll talk more about that later in another section. And they got their oracle and they went on. Well, In the Western Goetic traditions, young children were often used, and young children would be the vehicle through whom messages would come. And they had to be young, and they had to be pure, and they had to be blank tablets and all this sort of thing, or virgin women. Well, we didn't exactly have, I imagine, a virgin woman here in the Temple of Astarte, but she was the person through whom the oracle would come. And that's why the adeptus major stood behind her and guided it through the situation until eventually the voice would come through her as they looked through into the dark mirror and so on. Now, it seems like an awful lot of fuss for the oracle they got. People look at it and say, well, hey, that's something I could find, like written on a Chinese fortune cookie or something. But remember, this was staged. That was staged for us because he wanted to show how to do this correctly, because a lot of people are doing it incorrectly. And that was the process that was used for the reception of an oracle. And this, of course, was a staged presentation. There were phenomenal results from theurgical operations and communication or conversation with angelic beings. In the Elucoan of Martinez de Pasquale's, which was the kind of the place where people like San Martin developed before the French Revolution, this was a kind of precursor to what would develop as psychism and spiritualism and spiritism and so on. In the seances they had, which were the operations, magical operations to contact the guardian angel, so to speak, they had appearances, according to the testimony of people who were there, of beings that would appear in the air and would deliver an hour's worth of discourse and teaching, of divine teaching of different sorts and so on. So there have been very phenomenal results, and people have used it, and that was kind of the Eloquon was kind of a one might say an intermediary between the old seeking for an oracle by a single individual in his magic circle and seeking of an oracle with a group of people. And the whole group process in spiritualism and seances and things is another thing we'll discuss later. The other main use of the Goetia was in what I will designate as sorcery or wizardry. In this kind of a use, demonic or elemental beings are sent on a mission, which may be positive and may be negative. So it may be what some people would designate as white magic and black magic. There's no designation in magic between white and black. That's just a term that's used by some people to designate whether they think their use is positive or negative or good or evil. An example of a sorcerer or wizard using wizardry would be Shakespeare's character Prospero in The Tempest. If you're familiar with the story, he is a king who is kidnapped by his brother. He loses himself in studies of magical things and hermetic things and stops governing his kingdom well and turns over more and more responsibilities to his brother. One day his brother has him and his daughter kidnapped, put on a boat, and to be floated around out in the ocean and supposedly to turn over and drown. However, they come to an island and they live on the island, he with his daughter, and he frees an elemental spirit, Ariel, that has been imprisoned into a tree split by lightning by Sycorax, the evil witch that used to live on the island. And therefore the spirit has to serve him. Ariel has to serve him to do things like cause tempests and things like that. And by George, using his magical stuff, he is able to get all the people who have done him wrong to arrive on a ship and be shipwrecked in an illusory tempest, and therefore come onto the island where they wander around, and he puts them through various trials until they work out their karma. And when it's finally all solved through his magical technique, and the drama is resolved, he puts down his books, burns his books, returns to his kingdom, and etc. All is restored and all is forgiven, of those who are able to be forgiven, although many of them don't choose to be. It's a very wonderful story, and it's a wonderful story of using wizardry and sorcery in a very positive way, but it is still not the highest form and the highest use as in divination. So we've looked at the development of theurgy from shamanic origins and later Egyptian priestly contact with ancestors and communion with the dead. Again, that's sections you would have to study in the initiatic mysteries of antiquity, classical antiquity. I've said a little bit about the so-called Mithra liturgy of the papyri Graecae Magicae, the Greek magical papyri, in which one evokes a vision of the midnight sun. That is the vehicle for Apollo to give an oracle that is used in magical ways in the ancient Greek times, and it's probably associated with people who are Mithraic, or worshippers of Mithra. And then we have Egyptian, probably Hermetic, as we get into the change of the ages, we get into the Christian era, and in the later Neoplatonic stuff that has been developed through the Neoplatonists, and especially is known through On the Mysteries, and so on. This means the term is actually developed and used, theurgy, which means God working. And so the questions are, well, how can you work the gods? How can you make the gods work for you? And then the answers are that that human beings are themselves part of the highest God being, and therefore in their rightful position, they are the judges of the angels. They are the ones who have the right to expect the angels to help and serve them. And we talked about the medieval European Goetia, which came from Greek wizardry and magic and Jewish magic and Arab sorcery, and was connected with some alchemical tradition, but not really with the Hermetic tradition that was revived in the Hermetic Renaissance that we're going to be talking about later. It was really a tradition in its own right, the Goetia. We're going to take a look at Dr. Dee's 16th century experiments to contact angels and to learn the language of the angels, which he would call Enochian, after the prophet Enoch, whose writings, pseudepigraphical writings, are the real basis for Jewish angelology, etc. And at this point, we see with Dr. Dee in the 16th century, and that's the 1500s, time of Queen Elizabeth and so on, the Hermetic synthesis, that the Goetia have been synthesized now totally with the Hermetic Renaissance and Hermetic ideas, as above, so below, and so on, the use of sigils and all kinds of other things. And we're going to take an extra look, or a special look, at Dr. John Dee in a moment. And there are brief forms or uses of magical techniques from the Goetia for gathering oracles and getting oracles, and especially oracles concerning the future, predictions of the future. And some of the most famous versions of these are those used by Nostradamus, which was a combination of scrying and magical technique and mundane astrology. And we will look more closely at Nostradamus in a later section. In the Enlightenment era, from the 17th to the 19th centuries, and actually up into the modern time, theurgical operations were used for oracles and contact with the guardian angel. We mentioned the Alukoan. We can also talk about the Golden Dawn, which revived these rites, the Temple of Astarte, which we looked at, and so on. And that became the precursor to the mediumistic seances that became all the rage in the 19th century. Actually, a lot of that began in France, and then in America it began with the Fox sisters. We'll look at all that in the rise of spiritualism later on, in Spiritism. So what is the relevance of the Goetia, of the Goetic tradition, to the Western mystery tradition? It becomes relevant, especially relevant, because it is a way that the older Graal or Grail traditions, which were part of the Celtic and other more shamanic kinds of knowledge that were passed down, and that was brought over by the Roman soldiers and things as they colonized these areas. It synthesized this with the Hermetic knowledge that came from the Egyptians originally, and that was became the basis for really the Western mystery, what we call the Western mystery tradition, as it binds together astrology and alchemy and medicine and contact with theurgy and magic and all kinds of other things. About the period of time that we're looking at John Dee and these people, and this is the time of the Hermetic Renaissance, when the Hermetic literature is translated and brought into the West, and which is something we'll be talking about in another section later on. So the relevance is that it becomes synthesized with Hermetic tradition, and it produces the most advanced of the Hermetic sciences. Now, we'd like to talk about Dr. John Dee. He was probably the most educated person of his era, one of the most. He was a brilliant mathematician, a scientist of all types of science, optics and things. A lot of the science that he did lay down the foundations for Galileo and Newton and many other people. And he became an astrologer and a psychic advisor to Queen Elizabeth. She was originally set to be executed by Bloody Mary, who was Queen of England at that time, because Elizabeth was the youngest daughter of Henry VIII, and she was Protestant. Mary was Catholic, Mary Queen of the Scots, and Protestants and Catholics have been having bloody civil war, and so it was incumbent really upon Bloody Mary to do away with Elizabeth so she would not become queen. And he was called in by Elizabeth, and he looked at her chart and said, "You're not going to be executed. In fact, you're going to become Queen of England." And by golly, within a very short time, Bloody Mary died. And but poor old John Dee got put in prison and was scheduled himself to be burned or beheaded or something like that. But he was one of the most brilliant people in England, and he then escaped this fate and became the royal astrologer and the advisor to Queen Elizabeth. Well, he did a great many theurgical experiments. And he did it with a man named Edward Kelly. Now, Kelly was not a person of the highest.
During the Renaissance, there was perhaps no more intriguing figure than...
Well, you've had your introduction to the Goetia and theurgy and angel magic. What follows yet for you in the Western mystery tradition, medieval and modern, is a section on heresy and the Inquisition. And I think you'll find this is very important. We're going to go back now to the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries and take a look at what had developed and what the Inquisitions were. There were many Inquisitions. And we're going to understand why the Western mystery tradition was reduced to an underground stream, a hidden tradition, a tradition that had to be kept in highest secrecy. We're going to look at the Knights Templar in the 6th module and their connection with esoteric or speculative Freemasonry, and we're going to learn some things about Freemasonry at that point. I would refer you also to the seminar that we do on esoteric Freemasonry and Rosslyn Chapel, and we talk a little about that in this particular thing. We'll also learn about how it was that the Knights Templar probably used what today we call the Shroud of Turin, the face of the Master Jesus, in their spirituality, which was quite different than that of the Roman Catholic Church. Then we're going to look at the Hermetic Renaissance. How did the Hermetic literature finally come back into the Western in the European culture and society, and the massive effect it had? We're going to see how it was incorporated by painters like Botticelli into their very paintings. Very high magical hermetic ideas and ideals and techniques used in things that, well, I think you'll find to be quite amazing. In the 8th module, we'll look at alchemy and the Rosicrucian Enlightenment. We'll follow the history of alchemy up to the time of the Hermetic Renaissance, and then we'll look at the Rosicrucian Enlightenment, what happened in the 16th, 17th century, and how that influenced the Western mystery tradition, both spiritually and politically. In the 9th module, we're going to look at the entire 18th and 19th century. We're going to look at Swedenborgianism, spiritualism, the ultramasonic orders, Martinism, Gnosticism, the American sects that evolved, the New Thought, Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, the Golden Dawn Theosophy, and a whole lot of things that we're going to see what this amazing blooming of esoteric tradition is now in America, where there is freedom of religion. And after the French Revolution, when France was no longer under thumb of the Inquisition, and when the Catholic Church lost its grasp over religions other than Catholic religions. And finally, the last module, we're going to look at the 20th and the 21st centuries. We're going to look at, see how theosophy evolved in the West, and we're going to look at the great incursion of Eastern ideas, Buddhist ideas, Hindu ideas, into the West through the great World's Fairs and Vivekananda, who brings with him classical Hinduism and Hindu ideas, and theosophy that brings the Buddhist ideas and Tibetan Buddhist ideas. We're going to look at the Druidic revivals, the Wiccan revival. Really, Gardnerian Wicca is a rather recent phenomenon that reaches back and tries to revive Goetic traditions. We're going to look at Sufism as it develops in England and finally in America, and the neo-Gnostic movement, and magical schools, and builders of the adetum, Bota, the new mystery schools, and the psychic channelers, and all these other kinds of things, New Age movements and things. So we will see how the Western mystery tradition has contributed to what we see around us today, and what the deep roots are of some of the things we see around us today.